Hey everybody, welcome back to Wilson Builds. If you're new here, I'm Zach. Thank you so much for tuning in. And on today's episode, we are back on the Barn Find 1940 Ford pickup, and we are going to be turning its chassis into a roller. Alright, so if you saw the last video I uploaded of the 40, which is actually the first video of the series, I kind of went over what we had in the chassis and what we need to fix to kind of make it good again. And I don't mean good as in this is very poorly done work. It probably worked for the last person, and I don't want to down talk anyone else's work. However, there's a few things I would like to fix to make it up to kind of my standard. And from about here forward, there's a few things I'd like to attend to. Obviously there was a mount or something welded here that needed to be cut off, and the body was probably on when it got cut off because it wasn't ground down or fixed. So that's just jagged metal there. So that will be going. There's a couple mounts here and here made out of the same material. So I think this is probably for something. However, this one's offset about 3.5 inches forward of that one. So those are gonna get cut off. We're gonna start from a blank slate. We'll figure it out. The next thing is the steering bracket here. So some angle iron was used probably for a heim joint to grab the steering arm that goes to the rack and pinion. There's a relief cut in this motor mount and another probably, I don't know, maybe it's for the steering, probably, but another mount off the other motor mount. And by other motor mount, I mean there is 2 sets of motor mounts on this frame. So they'll both be coming off so we can start from scratch. And I think we're going to start there. So I'm going to start back here, grind those off, cut these, grind them, cut this, grind them flat, and then we'll start working on the motor mounts. Blended and all the little imperfections we talked about are all gone. So I'm gonna start sanding the frame now. Just prep it for the paint to stick really good. There's spots like this where there was some drippage from obviously someone painted something. But I'm gonna really focus on the bottom and the sides, and then we'll probably paint the bottom first and then flip it over maybe a day later and then do the top, because obviously I don't have a rotisserie, so it's a little bit challenging, but we're going to prep it either way and start probably with this side, do probably up to about there, flip it, do the same thing on the other side. Right, so we got all the sides done and the insides and the bottom. So I'm going to flip it over onto its right side now and just do the tops. And then we will start cleaning off all the sanding dust. So now that all the dust is sprayed off, I take my degreaser and a red Scotch-Brite. I just spray a couple areas, scrub it with the Scotch-Brite, and do this until the whole frame is done. Okay, frame is all dry. I'm gonna push it back into the garage because it's the end of the day, and we'll go over it a little bit more and see if there's any more prep we need to do before paint. All right, so I'm really happy with where we got to today. The frame is basically all ready for paint. We got it cleaned, sanded, all prepped, and I think we can spray some paint on tomorrow. However, we do need to get the paint tomorrow. I believe it comes in a satin black, but I would lean towards more of a gloss if it's available. However, little kind of step backwards. If we paint this tomorrow and then further down the road we put our motor in, I'm gonna have to grind a little bit of the new paint off to weld the motor mounts in. Now I've done this before and it's not that big of a deal. You just touch it up with a bit of a rattle can. However, I think that's what we're gonna do. I don't wanna really wait until the motor's ready because I don't know when that time is gonna be, because we still need to get the cab on. The cab needs to be on in the right space to mock the motor up. So I think we're just gonna do it. However, we're gonna be doing that tomorrow. So what it's gonna be like 12 hours for me will be a few seconds for you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, so I got the frame outside now, and I've decided to go a little bit further with the stripping process. I'm gonna use this Scotch-Brite disc and just take it all down to bare steel. Do we have to? Probably not, but after seeing it for a few days here, I've decided to, because it won't take too long, and then I have our paint now, so we'll be going over the paint process once this is all stripped. All right, and here is the paint we decided to use. The Del Fleet Essential by PPG. This is a direct to metal chassis black and has a hardener, activator. It's a 4-to-1-to-1. And we're gonna mix this right now, put it in our gun, and go spray the bottom of the frame. Painted and full coverage, which is super nice. It dried a little kind of orange peely, as you see, but I mean, you're never going to see this frame, and I was more worried about just having coverage and having the paint all even. And I read on the internet that a lot of people had this result and it's normal, but that's probably a lot of people like me trying to convince themselves that their paint job is good. The only real area of concern was, I don't know if you can see this in the light here, those fish eyes underneath which would be underneath the motor on the cross member. That's probably because it was contaminated and a little bit dirty from the grease and stuff like that. So 9-inch, I think we're gonna start putting that in now. Our front end stuff isn't quite arrived yet, so we can get the 9-inch, get the suspension in, and I think it'll be a good starting point for getting this thing back together. So we got all our hardware to put back in our rear end. So we have our plates with our shock mounts, our U-bolts, our wedges for the right pinion angle, and our rear shocks. However, they're kind of beat up. So I'm gonna go put a really quick coat of paint on it, nothing too serious, mostly just to hide a couple little imperfections, but might as well do it while it's all off. So I'll be back in a few minutes and these will look much better. All right, so we gave the paint some time to dry, so these are ready to install. I already put the wedges on the leaves here, so we'll just be lowering the rear end through there, and then onto the wedges, and then we'll set everything else up. All right, right, so I ran into my first issue when we were putting back the rear end, and that is the through bolt that goes through the leaf springs here. Yes, it's long enough now, but when we put our wedge on, it's kind of non-existent. So it's not allowing the bolt to go into the guide hole on the mount on the rear end. So we have to make this a smidge longer, maybe like an 1/8. So I got some ready rod. We're just gonna cut it to size, do it on both sides. That side is far worse than this side. This side you can actually get a little bit of guidance to our guide hole on the mount, but be easy to replace them. So I'm gonna cut this down, put them in, and then hopefully the rear end will go in with ease. Just like that, our little bolt is made, and it's perfect for what we need. It's gonna stick up a little bit more, so way better for our little guide holes on our mount. So I'll thread this in. Probably have to paint this. I just welded a tip on to make it look like the old one. So we'll get this in there. Probably take a second, like so, and then our wedge will go in, and there's way more of a lip there now. All right, so now we just need to get our bolt on. I'm gonna put some Loctite on there, and then we'll do the other side, and then just roll the rear end back in. So the rear end is all in now with all new hardware. It's all anti-seize, so it's all ready to go and it's fresh. Now we can start working on the disc brake kit for the back, and that just came in that big order of Speedway stuff. So we're gonna have to pick through the boxes because we also have stuff for the 66 and the front end. So hopefully we find it pretty quickly, but then we'll start tackling the rear brakes. Bit of a step backwards this morning. I tried putting our rear brake kit on, and it is the wrong kit. So I ordered for the big Ford rear end pattern. This is the small Ford rear end pattern, which is 2 inches this way and 3 3/8 this way. So we ordered the new kit this morning, not a huge deal. However, I have everything lined up for our front suspension, so we can probably start doing that today. So I took a little bit of time yesterday and painted all our control arms with Hot Rod Satin Black by Spray Max, and then organized all our suspension pieces, drop spindles, rack and pinion, rotors. All right, now we're at the front of the car, and there's a little bit of an issue with our front crossmember, something we can work past, but I'm gonna show you guys nonetheless. So as you can see, we have a small hole right here, and when we take this out, we have a big hole. So the previous owner started grinding this all out and got a different sort of tubing to go into here, which is actually probably a better idea doing it this way. But the modern kits that we get come with these little guys, and they go in between the crossmember kind of interior. However, this one comes out to the outside. So this will be an outside weld. This will be an inside weld, not a big deal. These holes will be the same. They're in the exact same spot. So we're gonna have to cut this down, weld it to the outside, and then this one actually needs to be ground down a little bit, and now it'll be welded to the inside. However, I think it'll be totally fine. So I'm gonna make sure this is all flush. On this side, it needs like a little bit forward. There we go. Probably rock it right about there. So it's nice and flush, so we can do a nice weld around there and grind it down. Might even be able to push it forward a little bit, but I think that'll be fine. And then we'll have to make a really precise mark here and cut that very carefully so we can do the same kind of weld out here. And then, like I said, this one needs to be ground down just a tad because it is just, I mean, we could probably get it to fit, but we'll just grind it down just a smidge. Probably even file it down, and that'll be better. So I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna get some tape so we can carefully mark that one. All right, now we can take our finger sander and just sand where we think this is gonna be welded and a bit of a path to the hole, so our piece doesn't have a lot of resistance going in here. So I ground down a little bit on our piece here. Hypothetically, it should go in there now that we've ground down the paint for a little bit of a runway to the hole on both sides. All right, it is going in. However, I'm gonna need 2 hands. So I'm gonna set this up on the tripod. All right, let's get this close. It's actually pretty close right now. All right, so we have our little piece in there now. No binding, bolt goes in there nicely. Now we just have to take our piece of tape, mark that, cut it, and do the same thing. All right, so we have to cut along this inside line here. Obviously we'll cut kind of onto the tape so it doesn't take away the material that we need. So probably right along there with our blade. All right, let's see if this guy fits. Yep, good length. However, it's a little bit wiggly in here, as you can see. So I guess if we just centered it, like held it in the center of that hole and just did a tack and just filled in the rest of the gaps, it should be fine. All right, so now I have to prep the surface to do these outside welds, so I'll just grind off the paint here. And then to repaint it, I'll just mask this at the weld and repaint this and get it more prepped so we can get rid of these fisheyes as well. This side we have to weld the inside, but it's all ready to go. We'll leave the bolt in while we do it to keep it in place. This one, I'll probably grind out the inside too and do a couple little inside welds just to, I don't know, probably overkill, but it's there, so I might as well do it. So yeah, let's start grinding these off and then bring out the welder. So I blended our hole on both sides, and then I ground down on the inner cross member here where we're gonna have to weld our bracket for our bottom A-arms. So I'm gonna set those up now, and then we'll kind of go from there, see where we need to adjust anything. All right, that side is fitting really good. This side, however, is about too long by about 1/8. So I'm gonna take this A-arm out and try just spread it with my hands here. But we might need to take a little bit of material off the end of there. But we'll see. All right, we took a little bit off, so hopefully this fits now. Oh yeah, it'll fit fine. Perfect. All right, now that we got those in place, we can start welding them. So I'll tack a few spots, and then we'll do a nice bead, and then get on the bottom and do a nice bead down there. But overall, going very smoothly. So now we just have to wait for that to dry to put everything back together. So I might start assembling the shock assembly. I think there's some assembly, but I'm not too sure. But either way, looks really good. We got full coverage on our new pieces, and it is pretty close to the exact same color. Obviously a little bit of fisheye still in there, but again, it's not going to matter too much because the motor's going to be right there and you're never going to see it. All right, so we're taking a little bit of a detour from our front suspension, and I'm going to start working on a few things that need to be painted. Now you may be asking yourself, why am I talking about painting when I'm unboxing some rotors? And you'd be right to ask that. However, I like painting my rotors, and I have on most of my vehicles. I just think it really looks cool when it's done. And realistically, we're not actually painting the rotor surface that the pad goes on, but we're painting everything else. Because if you've seen a disc brake car sit for a while, a lot of the areas in here, up top, can get rusty and just make the car look kind of, I don't know, not taken care of. So I like masking everything but our pad surface, and we'll paint everything kind of black, even this little kind of channel here. Everything but what the pad touches, because when you brake, it's technically resurfacing, so any rust buildup or anything after sat for too long will come off when the pads run. So we're gonna mask these up, give them a paint. I gotta paint the spindles as well, and then we can start putting the front end actually fully together. So these discs come with a layer of grease to actually stop any rusting when shipping. So we're gonna spray our degreaser on here and get really into the nooks and crannies, make sure everything is degreased so the paint sticks nicely. And now comes the tedious part, masking. This is the paint I like to use, Spray Max 2K Hot Rod Fat Black. There's the part number 3680212. All right, so while the paint dries and in between coats, I think we can start putting our lower A-arms and upper A-arms on, just A-arms in general. So I'm gonna start getting everything all lubed up, and we'll start assembling it. All right, so the rotors aren't completely 100% cured yet, but cured enough where we can start pulling off the tape. But we'll probably have to handle them tomorrow to put them on the car, which is not that big of a deal because it's the end of the day anyways. All right, now that we have the rotors all painted, we're gonna have to wait till tomorrow, like I said, to be able to handle them without, you know, marring them or scratching them. So I'm gonna call it for today, and we'll see you first thing in the morning. Good morning, everybody. We are all dry, ready to start putting our front assembly together. So the first thing we're gonna do is put our little rubber bump pad up in the, I guess, the coil tower, you would call it. This will just allow it to ride on a rubber surface instead of a metal surface in case it ever made a weird sound or slipped or something like that. But these are awesome, they quiet it down quite a bit. And then we're gonna go to our shock. I've already put on our little rubber oscillator, I think that's what you call them, I'm not too sure. However, when you're doing this, if you do it, there is two sides here. So there's a big diameter kind of ridge and a small diameter ridge. And obviously the big diameter ridge goes in the, I don't know, let's just call this the shock tower from now on, the shock tower. So that will go in there. And then obviously the bigger one will ride nicely in there instead of the small one, which would have a lot more room to move. So when you do this, obviously the big one goes facing up on the bottom of your shock. And then when you put it in, the bigger diameter goes facing down on the top for obvious reasons. So let's get our coil on here. Get it through our A-arm. like so. Line it up with our bottom holes here. So I was looking through a bunch of photos of other people's Mustang 2 front ends on this chassis specifically, and I don't know what this tongue is for. So I'm gonna cut it off. It kind of gets in the way of our rack and pinion. So cut it off, make it nice, cover a little bit of paint where we cut, and then we'll continue with installing this again. All right, so our rear brakes just came in the mail. So I guess we'll start unboxing it, pull the axles, and then installing it, and then maybe putting wheels on. Anyways, this is really heavy, so let's start unboxing it. All right, everything, discs, calipers, all our mounts. It comes with 3 different mounts for 3 different types of 9-inch. Obviously, we'll only be using one. All our e-brake cables, stuff like that, brake cables. So I'm gonna go paint these and our calipers so they can start drying when we start putting on our mounts to the rear end. All right, so I pulled the axle out on the other end already for when we bought our first set of brakes that didn't work. So we're just gonna pull this plate off, yank our axle out, and we'll start installing our hardware kit to hold our rear calipers. All right, so these brackets come in a few different sizes, and the size we're looking for again is the small Ford size. So it looks like it kind of, comes with everything. Yeah, that might be a caliper mount. Okay, I see how it is. So it has the actual bracket mount, and then kind of the mount that would hold this caliper mount. So I'm gonna take a wild guess here and say that this is the small Ford because this is the smallest brackets we have here. Yeah, those are them. So, obviously, those are the same. So, one for this side, one for the other side. Now we just have to figure out how they go in there. I'm assuming something like that. No, it wouldn't be like that. It'd be like that. So, just gotta figure out how all this goes on now. So yeah, let's just maybe read the instructions. All right, so we're all ready to go. We have our spacer, which goes on first. Just gonna put the T-bolts in here to hold it. We have our axle retention plate, which will go on when we put the axle in. Then this is our caliper mount. I guess it's like a secondary mount because this goes on, and then we space it, and then this goes on. If that didn't make sense, it will very soon. So I just greased up the splines and greased up the bearings. So we can put that guy in. Like so. Come on. Like so. Get that in place. Put our retention plate in. It's gonna be a little finicky if you don't get it in the right spot. There it goes. Now I'm gonna put the rest of our T-bolts in. So, before we get too carried away, I'm gonna put a little bit of anti-seize on those guys. And then our, I guess, like we said, our secondary plate is gonna go on like this. And then we can actually start putting our bolts on to hold this all together. Now we can start mounting our caliper mount. So we put our bolts through here, like so, 2 on the top, and 2 on the bottom. And they have these spacers, go like so. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's get a little bit of anti-seize on here. I like using anti-seize, as you guys can tell. The mount can go on. Now for the final step, putting it on our discs and our calipers. So as you can see, disc is all painted, same as the front. So what holes is it? Here they are there. Like so. And then our caliper, make sure it is the right side. Yep, right hand. Get these together.
All right guys, I know I said at the start of the video we would have a roller by the end of this, and we technically do. We're just short of wheels. However, it does roll on the cart, so technically we still have a roller. We got all the brakes done, really happy with that, got the rear end back in. This is ready to put wheels on now, and that's exciting because that opens up so many different avenues. We can put the radiator in, which means we can start spacing the motor, which means we can start building the exhaust, which means we can start doing brake lines, and so on and so forth. There is a lot to do before we put the body on because it is way easier to do with the body off. And the body needs a little bit of work here and there, so we're not in a huge rush. However, super, super happy with this. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for staying this long in the video and supporting the channel. I can't thank you guys enough. But calling the video there, so we will see you on the next time of Wilson Builds. And if you liked what you saw today, don't be afraid to like, comment, subscribe. And if you want to see this truck being built and everything else we're working on, don't be afraid to hit that notifications button so you know when we're uploading. Anyways, guys, we will see you on the next episode.